to nonverbal communication. So we've got this concept of vocalics. Does everybody have this? Can I erase this? And now we're moving on to other pieces of nonverbal communication, or more specifically, dealing with the body. So what's the first thing you think of when you think of how the body communicates?
Blushing.
Blushing? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any so that would deal with like facial expressions, right? So let's these are all in your readings for next week. I'm trying to lay out like a foundation today, and then the readings next week we'll be able to dive in more specifically. So we've got facial expressions. Other things you think of when you think of how the body communicates? Gestures. Yeah. And I'm going to go bigger than that because I want to talk about gestures as a piece of what? What'd you say, Sarah? Yeah, and when I'm doing body language is kind of a specific thing, right? Like a more what was that?
Movement.
Movement. Yes. Yes. Excellent. So movement, there's a lot under that. And I don't know if it's Greek or Latin, but the sort of, I'll call it fancy word for that is kinesics. That means movement. And under that fall most of these things. So the three main areas under that are gestures, eyes and face, and posture. So let's talk about gestures first. And I'm going to actually do so over here. We're going to like migrate across the board. We doing okay, video? Okay, good. There's sort of like three areas, well, and I'm even going to do more because I found this other text that kind of helps a little bit. So some of the areas that these fall in are emblems, illustrators, effect displays, regulator, and adapter. What's an emblem? Any guesses on what an emblem is?
No idea.
So it's the small group of nonverbal communication that can be translated into words. Derek, can you come up here just for a quick second? Great. I just want the video to see us. What's this? Yeah, so you have a word for this.
Hi.
But also, yeah, so that's maybe another one, right? A wave, right? But what is this? Yeah, or a, yeah. Neither one of us very good. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for helping. So an emblem is a nonverbal piece of communication that can be translated, that we have a word for, basically. Slightly different is an illustrator. An illustrator, want to make sure I have this right. Serves as a, right, like as a function of emphasis. I like to think of illustrators as, we don't have a word for it, but it means something very specific. See, I got it. See, yeah. Thank you so much, right? Right, anytime we're pointing, you're trying to give directions. I went to Italy once, and because I look Italian, people ask me for directions in Italian. I was very happy. I look more Italian with longer hair, and I'm not Italian, unfortunately. But and so I write lots of pointing, lots of map looking and pointing. Those are illustrators, right? Do you ever do one of these? I have a right, where you're trying to like. Okay, it's time. I watch a lot of cop shows, and this happens a lot on cop shows, like in Castle, where like one of them is trapped and they know each other so well, and so they watch each other, and then at the first slight like head illustrator, right, then one ducks and one dives, and they totally know what to do, right, just because of the nonverbal illustrators. So emblems are things we have words for. Illustrators are very specific gestures that sort of show us what to do, where to go, that we have, we don't have quite words for them, but they're very specific. They add emphasis. Affect displays are feelings expressed through our bodies. So I have a friend who knows I'm very emotional, and when something hits me, I often do this, right? Like right? If I feel touched by that, I'll slump on her. That's an affect display, right? Any other affect displays? I love the little kid one, when the little kids go. It's like you can't, like there's not even a word for it. There's just so much joy and happiness radiating out of their body. Especially little babies, how they shake. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they go, because they're so happy. Yeah, that's an affect display. A regulator is a motion that helps or that communicates to initiate or terminate speech in a social situation. So this is the big one, right? Like, more, hurry up, right? I spoke at a feminist club this week, and there was one kid at the feminist club who knows me really well. And so I kind of asked, like, what do you want me to do? They brought me there to talk about my no apology living stuff. So I said, okay, I'll do a quick spiel about my no apology living. And I said, Cameron, the kid who knows me really well, I said, if I talk too long, because he knows I'll talk a long time, give me like a wrap it up, right? That's a regulator, right? Wrap it up, hurry up, or more, right? What was that? Right, like, yeah, that's a good one, yeah. And an adapter, you're gonna love this. An adapter is bodily movement for comfort. The example that this text gives, it's basically related to satisfying bodily needs. So the one that the text gives is moving to get more comfortable. The example I think of is farting. Right? Like that communicates.
Did you say flirting or farting?
Farting.
Okay.
I definitely said farting.
Okay.
Or burping, right? My sister burped a lot as a child. Lots of adapters. And my mom would always be like, Tiffany. And Tiffany would be like, I can't help it, right? And I think most of the time she couldn't help it. There were times she totally bless you. That's a great example of an adapter. Thank you, Jordan. That was lovely.
Glad I
The
know.
body satisfying its needs, right?
Cracking your bag.
Yep. The fingers, yep.
Oh yeah.
When they all start doing it. Okay, so these are just gestures.
Your hand's so fucking anywhere else. Yeah.
Eyes and fit. Any questions on gestures?
I think we're good.
Eyes and face are sort of its own category. Jordan had a great example, right? She's talking about blushing. I think this falls into sort of two categories. You can have not only what your face is made of, but how you move your face. So I have huge eyebrows. They are very groomed right now, and if they were not groomed, they would take up a third of my face and rule the world. I have several theories for how I think I got these eyebrows. One is that I overslept in heaven the day they handed out eyebrows, got there late, and they were like, sorry, we gave your pair to a giant Italian man. Here are our heads. So I have these huge eyebrows, and in high school, there was this dude that came, I remember this very vividly, though it's not a huge deal. This dude came to help light one of our shows. He didn't even end up working for us. He was there like one day. But I have a very vivid memory at a very formative time in my life when I have these huge ass eyebrows that of course I have not learned to groom yet. And he said to me, you have amazing eyebrows. And I was like, I do? And he was like, yeah, they're so communicative, right? Like, and what he meant was that I have very vivid facial expressions that my eyebrows are a part of, right? So not only what your face is made out of, but also how your face moves and how your face communicates. Can anybody do the thing where you bop your eyebrows back and forth like, Goose is kind of doing it. My Matthew can do it, and so he'll do it to me, and he'll be like, can you picture it? And then I'll try to do it back, and it's just me going, because I can't do it, and then he makes fun, like he teases me because I can't really do it.
Does this include like the eyebrow raise?
Oh yeah, can you do that? Like The Rock?
I hate people who can do that.
My sister taught herself how to do both eyebrows. Like one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Black does the wave with him.
What?
Jack Black, you can do the wave.
Oh, Kenny?
Oh,
Yeah.
And Google.
We had these friends growing up, and the kids, their parents have one eyebrow that does it. Both of their parents do, and all the kids got it. So these like little 6-year-olds, and they'd look at you, and their one eyebrow would shoot up, the other one would shoot down. Like, it looks great.
That is amazing.
Are you looking at Jack Black doing it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions on eye and face?
So is that kind of like resting bitch face?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And why do we, right, like, that facial expression is so infamous for what it communicates. It's gotten its own verbal title. Right, that nonverbal communication is so famous, or infamous in this case, that it's gotten its own verbal label. Isn't that crazy?
Would this also include like eye rolling?
Yep. Or I love when my cats will side-eye me, right? They'll be like sleeping, and then I'll try to go pet them, and they'll be like, right? Like that's totally in eye and face.
That stares to.
Would glaring fall under this one?
Absolutely.
So that's not posture.
Yep, eye contact, how much eye contact, how little. We're doing speeches in my public speaking course. We're doing the first speeches, and I was teasing the kid who sat next to me one day because everybody just looks at the teacher. If they look up, they look at the teacher, and some of them try to look around, but mostly it's just up at the teacher. So I said to Eli, the kid who was sitting next to me, I said, don't you feel special because you get looked at because you sat next to me today? He's like, yeah. Because it's so obvious when you're the one getting looked at more than anyone else, right? Question?
I said it wrong.
No?
No.
Question?
I was wondering if it was Eli McCulloch.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up resting bitch face. We had a friend in high school, and friends over the years, but this one sticks out to me that, oh my gosh, her resting face was just, right, like you just thought she hated your guts. It was so intense. Anybody have somebody like that? Have a very specific resting face. Oh, are you? Or are you pointing at someone?
No.
No.
Me, no.
You know. So any other questions on eyes and face? Good. So now we'll move on to posture. There's sort of like three areas that sort of talk about posture, and they're binaries, or spectrums, depending on how you look at it. The first one is contraction and expansion. The second one is withdrawal, withdraw or approach. And the third one is body orientation. So, if we're thinking of bodies, right? Contraction is when our bodies come in, and that communicates something very specifically. I'm going to use all of you as an example. Whenever I ask for a volunteer, you all kind of go like this. Right? Like you all contract. You're like, maybe not me, right? Expansion is when we open. Right? I like to think of bar fights. Right?
How about the chest?
Will someone come bar fight with me? Will you come bar fight with me? Here, we're gonna do it this way so the video can see us. But right, like if we're gonna bar fight, right, we're gonna expand. Yeah. Can you imagine if we were coming to a bar fight? Okay, so go back that way. And we're gonna come to the bar fight contracted. Right? Like, can you see it, right? Like how ridiculous, right? That doesn't communicate what we want to communicate. The same thing with we say how we do withdraw and approach. Right? I imagine, even if I was expanded, imagine a bar fight like this, right? Like, yeah, come at me. Yeah, come get me. Yeah, right? Like, withdrawing. No, it's an approach while you bar fight, right? Like, yeah, bring it. Yeah, come on, right? I'm no match for you. Thank you, Goose. Thank you so much. Right, so, and see how these can kind of go together? This one will go in soon, but withdraw and approach. I've noticed in the Midwest that the approach often gets the withdrawal. So I have a much more immediate range of physical space than most people do in this area of the country. And I joke that it's like the 10-foot pole rule. So I'll get closer to someone and then they'll move slightly away. And then if I get too close, they will again move away. Right? Like it's like they're afraid of catching it. And so another example of the withdrawn approach, I think, is, so I often talk to strangers. And you have to be kind of careful, especially if the strangers are tiny humans, how, like, with that withdraw and approach. So I will sometimes, if a child has a shoe untied, I will want to tie that child's shoe, especially if the adult with them is, like, carrying stuff or busy or whatever. And so, but I have to be very careful in my approach, or there will be major withdrawal, right? Or unhappiness from the parent that I am approaching their child in an unsafe way. So instead of like rushing to tie their shoe, I will often go very slow and verbalize while I do the approach, right? Hi, my name's Megan. I'm very friendly. It looks like you have a shoe untied. I'm just gonna tie that for, right? Like, so I have a very specific way that I do the approach. So that communicates, right, that I'm not scary and that I have good intentions. Questions about contraction or expansion? And you see how these are binary, meaning like contraction versus expansion, but really it's a spectrum. So they're not actually binaries, one or the other, but they're on a range. Any questions on either of these? What? Good. Body orientation just deals with how your body is placed, right? Go to the mall. See lots of this going on, right? I sway. I've swayed for years. And people often ask me if I have children because of the sway, like because of my body orientation and how it's moving back and forth like this. I don't have children. I just naturally do this. Some of you hunch, get tension in your shoulders, or you're right, like, have you seen older people, how they kind of have that hunch? That deals with body orientation, right? They have done that so much that their body has permanently gone that way. Yeah, right? It's a little scary. Gotta kind of keep conscious of it.
I'm not entirely sure if this qualifies as nonverbal
Yeah.
communication, but what about like your cell phone and not paying attention to the conversation? Or
Yeah, I mean,
a form of nonverbal communication, like I don't want to talk to you, or
absolutely. So it doesn't qualify under movement, right? But there's this whole other side that we're going to read about, and I think the reading, referenced this thing hasn't been in my way all year, and all of a sudden it's like leaping out to hang out in our classes. But there's tons of factors of nonverbal communication. I'm just touching on, right? So we've got physical appearance. We have things, spatial things around us. Proxemics is one. So slightly different than movement. Proxemics deals with how you move in your space. Whenever I sit next to a stranger at like a theater or a movie theater or an event, I often turn to them and say, "Hi, my name's Megan. I don't have a lot of personal space, so if I'm in yours, please let me know." I have made friends that way because I don't control my arms very well. I'm 33 years old and I still don't really know how to control my arms, right? And so I like to tell people that so that they are not put off by my proxemics. I have friends who have kids, and they'll often say, "Give space." Because, right, the kids are crawling and touching and, ugh. Give space. Give Megan space. Right? Chronemics, which I'm not sure if the book talks about or not. But chronemics is the concept of time and how time moves in nonverbal. I went to a show last night, and my friends were doing the show, and I was excited to go see the show, but I was more excited in hopes that they would come out to eat with me afterwards, which they did. We went to Blackbird in Fargo, and I got to meet Chelsea's significant boy human, is what she calls him. And she's a queer female, so it's she doesn't like the term boyfriend, so she's a significant boy human, which I think is cool. So, and I had not met significant boy human, so they sat on one side of the table, and her student, Dryberg, his name's Matthew, we call him Dryberg to differentiate from my Matthew, sat next to me. Now, Dryberg, right, is several years younger than me. We're pretty good friends, and we're theater people, so our understanding of movement, space, etc., right, is much different than people. So at one time, him and I had our knees touching under the table. It wasn't a big deal. It was just like a casual, like, we were in each other's space. But of course, I had the thought, right, how long is this appropriate? I'm fine, right? Like, you can put your leg on me if you want, but does it get to a point where this is, do you see what I'm saying, where Chronos kicks in and like I need to adjust my space? Or have you ever had anyone grab your hand? Like they're telling you something meaningful and they grab your hand, and then it hits the point where you're both like, okay, how long do we hold hands? When is it appropriate? So I have some friends that will signal the squeeze to communicate, I still love you, right? I'm not pulling away because I don't want to hold your hand anymore, but the time is up. Squeeze, squeeze. And then we separate, right?
Hugs.
What?
Hugs.
Hugs, yeah.
How do you make it awkward?
Okay, if people like don't want to let go, you're like, okay.
Was it Christmas? At Christmas time, my sister had a gathering. She lives in Madison, and she's told all of her friends about me, but I haven't met tons of them. I mean, I've met some of them, but I live so far away. So I hadn't met this one friend, I think his name is Chuck, and my sister casually said to him, oh yeah, I love my sister, she gives really long, awkward hugs. So right, like that was her like introduction to Chuck for me. And so when I didn't know she told him this, so when I got there, Chuck was like, hi, and I was like, hi, and he was like, and I got, like, we reached the end of the hug and I went to pull away and he wouldn't let go.
See, that's when it's awkward. That's what it be.
So then I, right, like me, who tries to control that, right, to not make people feel awkward, I had let go because I thought that's the social norm of the time, but then he kept going and I was like, oh, you want to keep going? I would love to keep, right, like, so then I leaned in, right, like, bring it, Chuck, you're going to get uncomfortable far before I am, right? So time, you see how time can deal with lots of this? One thing I forgot to say, and it applies to kind of all of these, but I want you to remember the vocalics because I forgot to make this point. With the vocalics, while each of these tendencies are important in both verbal and nonverbal communication separately, notice how they all work together. So in the vocalics, we're often not having just volume, or just pitch, or just rate, but we're using them in a combination, right? Again, I'm thinking of the yelling, right? Like the Megan, 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 Megan Marie, you get over here now. And that's like not only the pitch falling, not only the volume change, but the big rate change, right? It's hard to have one of these without the other, right? That we often are doing a contraction and a withdraw at the same time, or an approach and an expansion at the same time. And you see how these paired with the vocalics, right? That if I'm saying, oh, okay, bye, but I'm moving towards you. Okay, bye, see you later, bye, right? The bye is gonna last longer than if I'm withdrawing while I'm saying bye. We were always the last ones out at church. My dad always made fun of us, right? Says it takes you 20 minutes to say goodbye. Right. Questions on any of these things? Right, like, so now from here, we're good video.